Mr. Beak's math class. Mr. Beak's math class. Yeah! Woo! All right, welcome to our second installment of 1.4 absolute value equations. Okay, real quick. Yesterday we talked about, I'm gonna skip that. That absolute value is the distance from zero. Okay, and it has kind of these two bar things, and distance can never be negative. Okay, so for example, if you had absolute value of x equals 4, well, there's two answers that could be that. 4 is 4 units away from 0, right? But also, negative 4 is 4 units away from 0. You see how those are both the same equal amount of steps? Okay? Because I can walk forwards or I could walk backwards, but I'm always walking a positive distance. Okay? So that's the moral of the story. Now we're going to add some things today from yesterday, and it's going to be a little bit more tricky, but just real quick, let's review one problem from yesterday. Do you see on this one how, even though, I mean, I know it has like the 2x and the plus 1 and stuff, but it's all inside the absolute values, okay? That's always the goal, is to get all the absolute value stuff alone equals, you know, the number, okay? And so since this one is already that way, we are good to go to solve it. How do we solve it? We're going to do two cases. Case 1 is going to be just a copy paste, exactly the same thing as the original equation. Almost every single person gets that one right. If people make mistakes, it's going to be on the second case. Case 2 is I want that to be equal to a negative number. So case 2 is going to be the same inside stuff, but it equals now into a negative 45. Whereas this one over here was a positive 45 because that's what the equation said. Okay? And so let me erase that plus sign there. Okay? So we just have two little two-step equations to solve. When we get them, that's our answers. Okay? So first off, I'm going to draw the line. Now a little shortcut. You're going to really do the same exact steps since this part is the same on both. So, I mean, if you want, what we're going to do is -1, you know, to both sides. But, I mean, there's nothing stopping you from just doing all 4 steps right off the bat, okay? Just for the reason of explanation, I won't, but that's a little shortcut for those of you who like that type of thing, okay? But anyways, I'm going to -1 to both sides. I'm going to get negative 2x equals, in this case, 44. So when I divide by -2, I'm going to get x equals negative 22. Okay? And over here, what I'm going to do, I mean, just the same steps that I just did right there, but it's going to be negative 2x equals negative 46. And when I divide by -2, I'm going to get x equals positive 23. Okay? Now, one of these answers happens to be a negative answer. One of those happens to be a positive answer. It might work out that way every time. It might not. You just got to do the math for it and see what you get. And some of you might also say, hey, Mr. Beak, I thought you said we couldn't have a negative number with absolute value. Well, you're right if that was your only thing that you're saying. The answer can never be negative. So like this number on the outside of the x, or the equals number, that could never be a negative, okay? So if we had, you know, blah, blah, blah equals a negative 5 or something, the answer to that one would be no solution. But in this case, these two numbers, this negative 22 and this positive 23, those equal a 45 that I wanted, okay? So, next up is, that's how we do ones from yesterday. I have a couple things that say, I made a mistake on purpose on these, and I want you to see if you can find it. So a little bit of like a problem solving skill. What did I do wrong on this one? And if you don't see it right away, I got half of, I did all my work right. I minus the 1, I divided by 2, and that's one of the right answers. But that's only case 1. Remember, I have to split it up into 2 cases. And case 2 would mean I'd have to do 2x plus 1 equals negative 17. And then I get a whole nother answer when I minus the 1. And then I divide it by 2. I'm going to get x also equals negative 9. So there should be 2 answers for each one of these. Okay? just like we did in our last problem. Okay? Next up, find the mistake on this one. I'll let you look. I know this isn't a normal class, so you're going to have to kind of just, pause the video. But if I'm looking at this, did they do case 1 and case 2 correct? No. There's our mistake right there. Okay? They did case 1 perfectly correct. They wrote down exactly that. But on case 2, this should be always just the same, right? That absolute value part. They made the negative right there. That should be a positive. And this is the part that should be the negative. Okay? And so you always make the equals number the negative one. Okay? All right. Find the mistake. This one's a little bit more hidden, and it's not really even a mistake if I'm being completely honest. It's more of a preference thing. But first off the bat, did they do the case 1 and case 2 correct? They have exactly that here, and equals the 14. That's perfect. And they have exactly that equals the negative 14. So that is perfect first step. They added 1 to both sides. They divided by negative 5 to both sides. That one's right. And this one's right. Here's the only thing I'm going to tell you. If you ever get fractions like that, first off, that'll be simplified to positive 13/5. Just leave it like that, because in the long run, I know most people don't like fractions and they'd rather have a decimal, but decimals are going to be a lot more difficult the way you go. So, like I said, not really a mistake, but a very nice preference if you just keep it as, simplify that to the positive. All right, and last one for find the mistake. There's something wrong in this one. And I understand it's kind of an overwhelming amount of things, but just pause the video and kind of look at it, okay? Let's take it one step at a time. In the black letter or numbers and letters and all that junk, did they simplify or did they solve that right? The answer is yes. They wrote it exactly down, and they wrote it exactly down equals negative 32. Okay? But where they're going to get an error is when they finally do all their work and they find their truth answers, if they plugged it in, they're going to get a wrong answer. Okay? And this is what we're going to talk about today. Because in today's problems, we're not going to just have the absolute value thing. Yesterday we would have just had this equals like 32. Now there's going to be stuff on the inside and outsides that we're going to have to get rid of those numbers first. Okay? So, I know I've been talking a long time. I'm just going to do 2 individual problems for you, okay? So if you can stick with me for 2 individual problems, we'll be good to go here. Let me bump this one down a little bit. There we go. Okay, a little bit more room to work. Okay? Ultimately, my goal, before I split it up into the case 1 and case 2, is I have to get rid of this minus 9, okay? Because I need the absolute value piece all by itself. I have to have it just this equals a number before I can split it up into my 2 cases. Okay? So sometimes there'll be a lot of steps to get those all by itself. This time it's only 1, right? I'm going to add 9 to both sides. Okay? And so that wipes it out there. This gives me a 15, and now I have negative a plus 2 equals 15. Okay? Now I can ignore all of this stuff that I just did, because now I have a brand new problem, and here is where I'm going to break up my case 1 and case 2s. Okay? That's a negative a, just so you know, not 9. But anyways, we're going to go negative a plus 2 equals 15. Notice that's exactly the same thing as this one. So, it's exactly the same, the way it should be. Most people always get that first one right. Where they have a problem is doing the next one, okay? I'm going to rewrite negative a plus 2. That's exactly the same. But then here, instead of writing the 15, I'm going to write the negative 15, okay? And now I just have 2 equations to solve. I'm just going to do those kind of quick because most of the time people know how to do that. It's just these 2 cases that they struggle on. So anyways, if I do that, I'm left with negative a equals 13. So therefore, really there's like a negative 1 there. Divide by negative 1. And you get a equals negative 13. Okay? And over here, 1 minus the 2, you get negative a equals negative 17. So therefore, regular a is going to be positive 17. Right? Those are your two answers for that one problem. Okay? All right. Next type equation. I know this video is getting long, but thanks for sticking with me. This one, notice this one up here had a, I erased it now, but it had a -9, so we added 9 to both sides. What does this one have? It has, let me get rid of that minus 2k thing. Okay. What does this one have? It has a -4 times 5g. All right. If we know anything about equations, we know that we have to do the opposite, or the inverse. So the inverse of timesing is dividing. So therefore, we're going to just divide by that -4 to both sides, and it wipes it out completely. And now I'm left with just what I wanted. I'm just having the 5g minus 12 in the absolute value equals, in this case, a +3. Okay? Now I can do my two cases. Now I solve it like I would normally. Okay? 5g minus 12 equals 3. Copy, paste. And over here, case 2 is 5g minus 12. But now instead of writing 3, I'm going to write equals -3. Okay? And I'm actually just going to leave that there, right? What you do both sides, you'd add 12, and then you divide by the 5, and whatever, okay? But hopefully, and then you add 12, do that same thing over here, and then divide by the 5, and divide by 5, okay? So, moral of the story is kind of clean up those, the absolute value thing, so it's all by itself, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. We'll practice some more problems, but just giving you an intro lesson for this next step of absolute values. Take care.
Mr. Big's math class. Mr. Big's math class.